We're live everywhere,
This is
right?
one you are live.
Okay.
Greetings. This is the behind-the-scene camera view of our set. Note the. I gotta set that up so it actually works there. There we go. You won't be able to see everything. We will. There we go. I think that works. Glenn, say hi to everybody.
How's it going, everybody?
Periscope.
Glad to be here again.
I always get to see you. They don't get to see me.
Well, let's put it over here then.
Well,
I'm
no.
happy with
I
that.
think it's good, just like this. Although, sorry, we're gonna mess around with this view. I'll show you the behind the scenes view here. So we're going live with the STEM Jobs Lab. There's our logo. You get to see the behind the scenes portion. If you click the link, you can actually come join us on Hangout and see the other view of this. So that'll do. Broadcast. We will, to some extent, ignore you. If you've got questions, shoot them over here. Is that annoying to have Periscope on its side like that?
Oh, no. I've never watched it with that side.
You did video work with Tucker. Yeah, probably do. Good like that.
But see, we've got a few people that have already showed
I'm
up.
going to set it down here because we're using the, there we go. Okay.
We have Dr. Ian Malcolm.
Am I live? Are we actually live? Oh, we got people on.
No, I don't think so. I think we've got I think EP is on. We've got
We have people here.
Daniela, I think from the other one. She was going to join in. We have Dr. Ian Malcolm across the room, I think, maybe. No? Oh, okay. Oh, EP is. Okay.
EP. We have people?
No, these are just people internally.
Okay. Dr. Ian Malcolm.
That's EP is trying to boost his status.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Oh, is that?
Yes.
Awesome. Live on. So topic today is on, we're actually digging back in. This is the second of 3 webinars. What you don't see is EP over there. We call him EP.
There's EP. Say hi,
Hey,
EP.
EP. Woo! Sweet. Okay. Working it out for us here. Yeah, again, so feel free to hit the link. We'll probably, to some extent, ignore you all over there because we're talking over here on the live, on the Hangout, but you get to see before we start and after we are completed.
Yeah. So we're talking earlier
See
today.
both of us, right?
Yeah. Well, they see your
You can
like
see my hands, like
and your chin.
my chin. Not the best way to do that. Is it better?
So.
Okay.
So Dr. Malcolm is a real doctor. That's not Ian Malcolm from like Jurassic Park then.
I still cannot
Could
get.
be.
So
So if I don't join, that's okay, right? Okay. 'Cause I'm
you
not
can't
going to be able
you can't
to.
show your slides though.
Seems like
But
no,
you're
I can
showing
show them right
here.
here. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so we're good.
Show
We're
behind
good.
here.
All right. Getting real
We're figuring
behind the
this out
scenes
as we
interaction
go.
about what's going on here. So.
We're figuring it out as we go.
So we have a couple polls that are. We have a poll that is up. I think about. Hey, EP, can you throw that poll up about?
Sure.
If they are educators, K-12 educators, if you're post-secondary educator or administrator, or if you're an employer.
Yes.
So
You guys can do poll too if you want to. Anyone that's from K-12, college, the employment side of things. We're going to actually cover topics around science, technology, engineering, math today from STEM Labs Live.
And feel free to use the chat. Let us know where you're from. We are broadcasting from our home studios here, STEM Jobs Labs in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, PA.
And so excited to have everybody join us today.
Just got back from DC.
Yeah, we were at the Million Women Mentors.
Say that 10
I know,
times
that's what I have to
fast.
say. Million Women Mentors Summit out there.
Yeah, I think it was a good event. Great event, really. They had we got 6 lieutenant governors. or
Yeah,
so.
yeah. They're a group that's really working to get mentors for women and trying to promote the value of having mentorship in your life, and really trying to mentor women around STEM careers and those opportunities and helping them along the way. Some pretty amazing people that we talked to. They've got over 400,000 mentors committed right now. Some really great presentations.
Yeah, the way they end up doing it is they'll take pledges and then get a software platform for the pledges from the employment or state government aspect of it, and then connect with organizations like ours as we connect with you as teachers or others to provide those pledges or to make those links for students, especially. Help them get a sense of what it's like in science, technology, or math, engineering, and math in terms of careers, who's out there, and ideally show the path toward a solid career.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that we talked about a little bit last week, and we'll get into it. I think next week probably at this rate. But talking about being able to see yourself in those roles, how important it is to have someone that helps you understand what that job is about and helps you through those hurdles that's gone through it before. So it's a great organization doing some amazing things. And we were happy to be there. Met some really phenomenal people that I'm thinking that we're going to try to bring on to one of our webinars down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Kara Russell, right? Kara Russell from Fathom. So she started off the Fathom Cruise Lines. Those of you that know of Carnival Cruise Lines may not know of their new, and the reason that I am looking down here is just to get a live Periscope. So if you have Periscope application, if you want to see sort of the behind the scenes shot, I'm looking down at our camera view from there, and then vice versa. But so Kara Russell is started helped to found that. I mean, tremendous background in terms of engineering, worked at Nike, a number of organizations like that globally, and has converted that into a cruise where you end up doing work around the world. What they're doing, one of the locations they go to is the Dominican Republic, and they're helping a small community there of women actually start up a chocolate
business.
Yeah, chocolate business there. And so what you do on the cruise is help build infrastructure and create business lines for them. Do good social projects.
Right. Well, she was saying that their biggest issue is they built this phenomenal business around making chocolate, but they're getting huge demand for it, but they need more help producing it and stuff. So maybe if you join one of the cruises, you had a chance to actually walk away with a bunch of chocolate at the end of it too.
It might be, interesting. I know that, so April is their first cruise they're coming out with, and then August will be an actual STEM-focused cruise, I think even for students that are going through that. So, we'll have her on. Her story, just fantastic. Really neat entrepreneur. Yeah. And one of the many that are coming. Our issue is just about to hit, going to print here very shortly, focusing on land, air, sea, space science, and have some cool topics there. So getting behind the scenes on Solar Impulse. Yeah. They circumnavigated the globe. We have a female engineer, aerospace engineer in their control center in Monaco, which would be a cool place to visit.
Yeah, I'd love to go to Monaco. Yeah. Speaking of space, I just I saw this morning that there are 2 black holes that they've noticed that I think are going to collide.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. And it's going to happen any moment now, basically, like next 100,000 years.
That's any moment now?
Well, that's relatively speaking.
100,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that they're 3.5 billion light years away, which is that's a long way. That's even further than our drive to DC was.
Yeah, it was. It felt like about 4 billion light years away.
But no. So they're hoping to get some unprecedented data information about how the solar system and how the universe works from these 2 masses that they're spinning around each other right now, and they're going to eventually collide.
It's neat. Yeah, it really works. And we did behind the scenes at Interstellar, which tried to graphically depict this concept of the black hole and gravitational forces local to it. This issue coming out looks at the science side of that. So we have Lockheed Martin from the aerospace side that we've interviewed.
Right.
In fact, EP does a lot of these interviews. He's not on camera, but he's our man behind the scenes. So big shout out to EP out there.
Yo, EP.
Yo, EP. We have another audience, a live audience in the room today as well. So we may be heckled from time to time. Just ignore them. They won't go away. But all good people. So as we roll in, I know last week we went through the four, so there are four big questions, but the four, I guess, ingredients of the recipe around launching a STEM program. We're going to dig into, I think, two of them today. We're going through this, and we wound up getting detailed enough in just the one that we'll hopefully get through.
Hopefully we can make it through both of them.
Yeah. So if we start to, if you need us to speed up, let us know either way there. But if not, we'll actually just extend it out. So the plan is for this is the second of three to go into a third webinar next time. But we're also looking at the full schedule for the remaining part of the year, and I think some really cool stuff coming out of STEM Jobs Labs, as well as some content that will be good for your students. So I look forward to that. We one of the Abdul Muhammad, right?
Right.
So that story that hit this past week,
where he built the clock.
built a clock,
Right.
took it to school,
Got
arrested.
thought it was a bomb.
Right.
Can I say bomb on webinar?
I don't know. Can we?
No.
We have the auditor in the back.
I
Are
think
we allowed
so.
to say bomb on a webinar? No.
Probably not.
Probably
Okay.
not. Well, too late.
Don't
We'll
say that.
edit that later.
Okay. So anyway,
So-
we actually took we have an article online if you want to see it, where we looked at the images that we found from the clock that he made, and do a comparative analysis between that and if you just took apart an RCA digital clock
Right.
itself. And that's effectively what he did. He took apart a digital clock, repurposed that, reframed that into his clock.
Right.
He did there. So anyway, the interesting piece for probably your students to read. And that's kind of the stuff we look at. Take relevant items in the news today, get down underneath them for students to have a good sense, and for you to be able to use in the classroom too, and talk about relevant topics like this. I know next year we'll be hitting the election cycle, and the STEM behind elections will be interesting.
Yeah. No. The whole we were talking on our way back from DC about polling.
You running
and
for president? I think.
me running for president.
Right.
That I don't remember that part. Maybe I was tired yesterday, so maybe that was it. But,
Right. Yeah. No.
I mean, just the whole thing about polling and how is it possible to poll a few thousand people and get so close on results for an entire country? The new mechanisms for elections and some of the interesting things around online elections and concerns around hacking those things and all those lots of interesting facets to that are really heavily involve technology and math and data sciences and those kind of things. So that'll be fun. Yeah. So
Good.
we're getting close to time now. We've got a few more folks have come on board. Again, if you want to let us know where you're from, that'd be great. And love to hear where you're at. And we're here in Pittsburgh. We've got
Got a poll on there too to see if you whether employer, post-secondary, or K through 12 in terms of representation. What are we looking at right now
we've got about 8 people on so far.
in terms of the poll?
Oh,
Like
they're
ours?
all corporate right now. That's it.
Oh,
So,
good, excellent. All right, well, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
good, because we're gonna. I guess last time we had a lot of K-12, so good to have corporations on board today talking about making these connections and partnerships. And so you may not have heard, I guess, some of the questions and pieces that we had, but that'll be good. We'll dig in and how to connect your organizations to schools. That's sort of my end of the world, is that the job side of things. That's why you're probably wondering why are we wearing these particular outfits.
yeah,
One of those is because he keeps blowing stuff up, and I don't like to get them on my shirt.
you can't really
so
see my chef coat as much.
That's a good, chef outfit. We've got a image of you.
Can you show that picture?
Yeah,
Okay.
see if we can do that here. Oh, you know what? I started them at the end, which doesn't help.
Yeah. So
There you go. So
yeah.
this is you. The
That's-
Bananas
that's me.
Foster, I believe.
Yep.
We took that image. Looks a lot like you. It's like
Yeah.
someone just pasted your face on
I do like to cook a lot, and I love Bananas Foster. I like flames, so
Yes.
it's all good. It's all
But really what you've been cooking up are the 4 ingredients, which is student opportunities, career focus, diversity, and partnership. Those frame what we call our STEM Jobs Approved program. And that's actually a whole survey piece and data analysis that we work from employers to colleges to high schools to even nonprofit partners. So we'll have EP put up the link again to take that survey. If you haven't taken that survey, we've got industry awards being announced upcoming very shortly here. National awards are then announced in December, and then we have a top 50 award listing coming out in the spring and then in the springtime. So those are good. But what we're digging into here is some of the content, the data behind the scenes on these issues, and specifically today we're going to look at student opportunities and career focus and how you can connect those with your STEM programs or workforce development programs, especially for those employment partners that we have today.
Yeah.
So we dig into that. I guess so. Background-wise, there are four primary questions, and I will say too, there's some lag in what you're viewing and what we're saying. So if you have questions, please ask the questions. We'll try to get to those and to answer those pieces. And if there's any lag on there, just give us a little bit of time, and we'll jump into those questions as soon as we can. So what you're seeing now are the four primary questions that we try to ask. Last week, the suggestion was look at your STEM programs. You've got to run your workforce development programs or student programs that you have. Ask these four questions or see how your programs answer these four questions. If you can answer these four questions, the more effective you are at answering these four questions, the more effective your program will be in terms of outcomes. And the three major outcomes we're looking at are developing greater pipelines of college-ready, college-bound, and career-oriented, career-focused students, which comes down to really their academic outcomes that they have on their selection in STEM programs, and then ultimately quality hires. And so we talked a little bit about programs that we had that really developed starting in middle school and led to quality outcomes. Later on, we're going to dig into a little bit of the college end of that and the case studies today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, should we start doing these questions now? So the first.
Yeah, I'm going to flip just between those. I think it's hard to do that.
Yeah, that was helpful. That was helpful. So, the first one, when I was teaching this all the time, is when I was going to use this. We have to give students the opportunity to experience quality STEM instruction programs, give them real, genuine, real-world opportunities in the classroom to go see how those skills they're working on are used out in the workforce. So that's the first one we're talking about.
We're going to dig into that today for sure. The next one, if we're able to get into it today, hopefully we'll be able to, is talking about the career aspect, the career focus. So when you look at the program, ask the question, what students ask is, how can I do what I love? And Hughes Mission STEM Jobs, Do What You Love, really about the American dream, the dream of students out there. How can I do what I love is part of that your program should be able to address.
Yeah, and that really gets at the heart of what teachers struggle with is how do you get students to understand that their passions can translate into careers. That if I really am into cooking, if I really am into sports, I'm really into dancing, music, science, technology, video games, whatever it is that I'm passionate about, how can I translate that into a job where I can do what I love? We spoke to a gentleman who runs a business called Pitmoss. And it's actually artificial peat moss that's probably going to save the world in some ways. I mean, the destruction of the peat bogs is a huge environmental issue, and he's developed a synthetic peat moss that's far better than regular peat moss.
And he was on Shark Tank too.
Yeah, and he was on Shark Tank, and he got partnered with those guys through that, and has this amazing product. And we were talking to him, and one thing he said was that from a very young age, he had a greenhouse, and he loved plants, and he loved growing things. And he was on the verge of going to law school. He had moved to Boston and was going to go to law school, and just said, you know what? I don't want to do that. I want to.
A great decision.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
That's the lawyer.
No, but he wanted to do what he loves. So he actually went and worked at a nursery for a few years. I mean, when the trucks would come and back up with all this peat moss, he started wondering, well, what is that stuff? And started digging into it, and that inquisitiveness, that ability to really use all of those skills that he had. And we'll talk more about this a little later on about the importance of of that. But it's so critical to be able to follow what you really are interested in, what you love.
Absolutely. And it's possible, very possible.
Yeah.
And that's probably the big piece of that. The next one is diversity, that diversity aspect. And we all know the numbers where they are in terms of the workforce needing greater diversity in these STEM areas, 74% white male, and a lot of skills that reside in minority and female students and graduates and workers, but not coming into this space. And so it's kind of twofold, but it is fundamentally answering, is there a place for me? And that is diversity in the opportunities that students have access to, as well as diversity of individuals accessing programs.
Yep. Yeah, we were out in DC at the Million Women Mentors Summit, so that right that time.
There you did.
And just so much great stuff going on there about how to get more women involved in STEM fields, how to mentor them, show them the way, and it's applicable not just to women, though, but minorities and even young men. We want the STEM pipeline is by no means full of anybody. I mean, we need to really overflow that pipeline. We talked, I think, before last week's show about if we need 6 million STEM workers in the next 4 or 5 years, that we actually need probably 24 million people to be going into those careers because of the ratios in terms of how many people actually get pulled away from STEM careers too.
Absolutely.
So
get hired elsewhere.
if we need 24, 25 million people to enter STEM field or STEM, majors and really aim towards those careers, we need all people to get on board and be doing it.
For sure. And I know that with the number of employers that we have sort of focused on here, if you've got thoughts around what you're seeing from a access to talent standpoint, it'd be great to share and bring into the conversation. So the last piece of that, which is why we're really building this out as a partnership. So workforce development doesn't happen in isolation. And what we have seen over the years is this challenge around the blaming of educators and needing to have better, more cohesive partnerships from secondary education to post-secondary education all the way up to employers, so that you're driving toward demand and toward need and toward real jobs that are out there. And so the final piece is, how can I get there? So if we're able to answer that question of when will I ever use this abstract math concept, and can I use this doing what I love? Is there a place for me? And they see all that stuff. If they're still not able to access that job, they really haven't completed the cycle at the end of the day. So those are the four. These last two we're not going to hit on today. The focus today is really on student engagement. So how do we engage students, graduates, and this could be students in secondary education as well as post-secondary education when they're coming out and graduating. How do you engage them from the employment standpoint? This, we're talking about talent management, talent development, talent pool development, relational growth and development. Now, one of the things that Million Women Mentor program that they asked was that it was a question about what are the metrics for workforce development? Are there solid metrics? And that's a key challenge for employers. You've got bottom line. It's all about how does this address and hit the bottom line in our organization. And so if there aren't clear ways to establish that this investment in training somebody who may or may not be employed with us lead to employment, then you've got some real challenges. And so that's one of the pieces that we'll end up digging into a little later.
Just before we get into too much more, just remember that if you haven't already, take our poll question about what organization that you're representing, and feel free to give us some info on where you're coming from in the chat box. Let us know where you're at and where you're from. We've got Easy from Accenture on the chat. We've got Mary. I think Mary, you were, if I remember right, you were there last week, possibly from CalWest Educators.com. So some great folks on there. But yeah, let us know where you're from and kind of what your if you're again that educator, or if you're college, if you're employer, nonprofit, we'd love to know where you're from and get your take on what you want to get out of these things going forward. So
for sure. All right. So shall we roll into the first question?
Yeah.
Digging into that, when will I ever use this? And two, along the way, I'd be interested to see if those that were with us last time applied any of these questions to programs and what their experiences were with that. So that fundamental question, and when we'll ever use this, begins with the discussion we were talking about around connecting abstract ideas to things that are concrete and readily understandable. And there's a document, I don't know if we said that out last time, we'll be sure to do that this time. A research base is behind what we're sharing today. We've applied that in our own setting, but it does have a deep research basis. So as we're looking at, how do you drive effective programs and to improve, college-bound, college-ready, career-oriented students, one of those big things is connecting abstract ideas to things that are concrete and really understandable. It's a good perspective as a reformed math teacher.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, in mathematics, it's often a big struggle where, in a lot of STEM fields, it's it's the abstract ideas are where we're trying to get students to understand how they can generalize things and how they can find repeatable, simple ways to process information. But they have to understand the foundational concepts and has to connect to what they already know. And we were talking about fractions earlier being something that I always struggle with teaching. And students, you show them a fraction; it's an abstract representation of something, and you have to explain what that something is. And so you start with this idea of, you have an object, and maybe you break it into equal parts. Maybe it's a chocolate bar, maybe it's a pizza, whatever it is. And the students
Chocolate bar sounds pretty good.
Chocolate bar does sound good. Okay. Yeah. So you break the chocolate bar into, say, 4 pieces, and students get the idea of that's the whole bar. I broke it into 4 pieces. They know what 4 means. They understand what that represents. And then you could say, well, I'm going to eat one of these 4, and that all is very concrete, very understandable for students. And then you say, well, how would we represent that I ate 1 out of 4? And students might say, well, you can just say that you had 1 out of 4. I'm like, great, yeah, you can do that. Are there simpler ways to notate that? Are there ways that we can represent 1 out of 4 without having to say, I had 1 out of 4? And that's where fractions start to come in and different ratios and things like that. And so, but you start with that concrete piece, and you get students to then translate that into a more abstract representation of it.
And a lot of what's interesting is that a lot of the curriculum, a lot of the programs begin with the abstract and try to work back into the concrete piece. And that's where what is very real math anxiety really comes or stems from that approach to things.
Yeah, and from the career standpoint, I know I mentioned this last week, but trying to grab some abstract notion of what a job would look like and apply that back to concepts that we're working on in class, it doesn't work. You've got to start with this real sense of here's a job, here's what we're doing, and how do these different topics in science and technology, engineering, and mathematics, how do those apply to that job, and just make it really very real, very touchable for students.
Yeah, which brings to the second point you were talking about earlier on with us, or with me, around this idea that math really is a language. I mean, it's we're putting up here this idea that creativity is as important as literacy, but fundamentally, these STEM subjects are a big piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, talking about creativity and mathematics and comparing it to learning a language. When you learn a language, you learn conjugations of verbs. When you know the letters from your own experience learning your native language, so you know those letters. Sometimes you don't, though. If you're learning, say, if I was learning Chinese, there's a whole different symbology that goes with that, a whole different symbol system. But there's parts that you're familiar with. You learn conjugations, you learn the meanings of words, but you're not really fluent in that language. You can't have conversational skill without some element of creativity and applying all of those things together at once. And I heard from somebody that the true test of your ability to know a language is if you can tell a joke in that language. So that would imply the ability to really be able to take all of those different pieces, the vocabulary, the context, the conjugations, all those things, and shape them into a true, translatable structure of those things. And that's in mathematics the same thing. You can know all these disparate parts, but unless you can take them all together and put them all together and apply them toward something, then you really don't understand how it goes together. And that's the occupation, is really the application of that, the real meaningful problems to solve. That's where we take all of those things and we say, well, what elements can I bring together to apply in this situation?
Sure.
That's the power of that.
And so the kind of the practical outcome when we talk about STEM literacy is really creativity. Another way to say that, right? So as students are become more literate in this language and in science and math, which is being able to apply them, as you're talking about, that the result of that is creativity, innovation, ultimately. In fact, one of the pieces that we looked at, so in working with employers specifically, and this is based on research, I think it's out of Georgetown, but maybe the Brooks Institution study, two good studies for y'all to look at in terms of framing and shaping your understanding of this sort of subject around STEM. But they did research and looked at different cohorts of groups of students. So those students that were exposed to or went through programs like you're talking about, where they started with STEM programs, they were sort of project-oriented programs, versus students that did not. The students that went through these programs were noted for having greater critical thinking. They were more active learners. They were better at complex problem solving, and in terms of their outcomes for innovation, higher outcomes on the innovation
Right.
piece of that. And so as you talk to employers, and these are different employers we've gone behind the scenes with, I don't, and for those of you that are employers with us that are here today, if we could tell you that tomorrow, you could go into your pool, your talent pool, for any given job that you have, and pull out those individuals, rise to the top of those individuals that were better critical thinkers, more active learners, better complex problem solving, and more likely to impact the innovation of your organization, you would do it, right?
Right,
And that's
absolutely.
exactly what you're trying to hire. Precisely what we're trying to hire. So these STEM programs fundamentally, I know that we tend to boil them down into subjects, into very specific
Right.
subjects, and think about them as biology or algebra or calculus. We should not be thinking about them just as subjects themselves. They are the means by which we create literacy, creative literacy that develops these kinds of outcomes: critical
Right.
thinking, active learning, complex problem solving, innovation.
And the thing about those skills is that you get students engaged in a desire to want to go and be something. I want to be a flavor chemist. That was always one of my favorite ones. Or
Yes.
I want to be a food stylist, or I want to be a showrunner for Cirque du Soleil, or whatever it is. You get them engaged in that process. They learn those skills. These are resilient transitional skills, and maybe at some point in time they find other jobs that interest them as well, maybe in that same area, maybe outside that same area. So as an employer, getting students interested in STEM, whether it's directly related to your industry or not, ultimately benefits you as an employer, because those students are going to be highly hireable employees for your company. And it's a matter of you build out the pipeline across the board, and you have lots and lots of candidates to choose from. And that really is one of the big gaps right now, is just getting those students to see those jobs as being interesting, fascinating, intriguing areas to go into, and understanding that STEM skills and those abilities, these abilities here, are applicable across industries.
Yeah, and across jobs. And this is what I found that working in healthcare, why so many organizations would hire our people from us, or try to basically take them from us, is because of these skills. The whole concept was that as you get exposed to these types of environments, which STEM project problem solving comes through, if you engage in these kinds of subjects, which we did in the healthcare industry, that you want these in any kind of position that you're hiring for.
Yep.
And so part of what we developed there was the ability to screen and define these individuals, which means that you can't look at a high school diploma as being the same across the board. You cannot look at a bachelor's degree as being the same across the board. Getting deeper knowledge and understanding of what someone has actually learned and mastered is critical to. And with today's data structures, we can actually get beyond that.
Right.
So we want to get to a specific example. Over the past year here, we've done a lot of development at the STEM Jobs Labs. One of our partners here was Eastern Kentucky University. We're going to talk about with them and what they allowed us to do over the past year is they sponsored our content and materials to go into 5 high schools in the area and also connected with employers there. And this is the exact type of model that we're looking to build. The outcomes were fantastic, both from engagement of students in the high school as well as into the university, and then the connectivity then with the employers really helped to drive a lot of things. But one of the first things we looked at across these schools were how are they implementing STEM programs? What did it look like? And so we come to this idea of the need to use instructional strategies that mirror how knowledge and skills are pursued by professionals.
Right, and that's one thing that I know in schools, again, they're often, and we'll show some examples here, but in a job, in our job, no one ever comes to me and says, "Hey, Glenn, can you do the math part of this job?"
Well, sometimes I do that.
Well, that's
kind of good at math.
Yeah. But typically it's very integrated. We all work together on these things, and I, to that point, I tend to, if there's a math section, I might step up and lend a little more expertise in that area. If it's something that deals more with labor policy and compliance and those kind of things, as well as about a million other things, you'll lend your expertise in those areas. But it's collaborative, and it's definitely cross-functional, and it's certainly not isolated in terms of math, science, technology, engineering focus. They're projects, and we all contribute to it.
Yeah, and we go back to that we talked about last time, the importance of STEM literacy in general, the difference between literacy and proficiency and capability, or your STEM skills. But that basic literacy, because you're utilizing these skills across the board in whatever kind of occupation you're in. So let's look at some of the ways, and maybe if we've got some of the K-12 educators out there, could raise your hands on this, and it may look like the way that you are currently instructing at your STEM program. Then we'll show you what we wound up doing in terms of outcomes. So you can walk us through some of these. Hopefully y'all can see the circles that are on there. We'll definitely be sharing this content with you afterwards.
Yeah, so what you see is sort of a whole progression of different ideas around how STEM has been taught and how we've tried to kind of change it over time. So really, I think traditionally when I was coming through school, it was all just separate disciplines. So you had your science class, your math class. We didn't even have engineering programs when I went through high school. Technology, limited. I don't want to give away how old I am, but I do remember working on a Commodore 64 at one point in time in our computer lab. So
you had a computer lab.
We did.
Lucky you.
I know. Yeah, but you and I are about the same age.
I know.
So I don't know.
School had access to more things.
And then you might see over here. You see kind of maybe we're going to combine some of the easier ones together, science and math, maybe for example, or you might do math using some technology. Like doing math with a calculator suddenly counts as
math with technology.
Yeah.
And a part of that too is because you don't like engineering entering into schools. It's not in the curriculum. I mean,
right.
And in fact, for years and years, it's been this separation. You cannot teach anything about engineering design, et cetera, until you get into post-secondary and start getting into calculus-based sciences.
Right.
And so the organizations like PLTW, which has been a partners of ours, and others, we're seeing that engineering design is now beginning to percolate at least a little bit in the secondary education.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more programs that are popping up. So you might see STEM classes where science is sort of the center piece of that, and then they fold in technology, engineering, and mathematics around that. You'll often see STEM programs, but still those subjects are taught very individually with little or no collaboration, but students are on kind of a STEM track within the school, so they do maybe more of those classes, but again, they're very siloed, very individual. And then start to see more and more kind of integration of this science and math with technology and engineering as sort of the bridge between those two. STEM programs that are coordinated across disciplines, so they might be working on some similar projects with some collaboration amongst teachers, but again, and that kind of is similar to this one here, where they're integrated, and here where you've got 2 or 3 disciplines that are combined. So you see lots of integration starting to happen. What's lacking in all of this, though, is that you're still thinking of these subjects as subjects, math, technology, engineering, and science, and not thinking of them in terms of how does that actually play out in the workforce.
So answering again, we go back to how do we answer the question, when will I ever use this? So a lot of different models in terms of STEM, and that's what we looked at. So we the sponsored high schools that we were working in, we ran this survey first. So how are you actually teaching it? How would you implement it if you could, if you had the resources for it? What do those look like? And these are the fundamental models that we've seen there, but we also have seen really around the country. And so our model's been a little bit different than that. It's to flip it so we answer the question of when will I ever use this and figure out a way to do that. And so this is the way we've drawn this particular model up. And the idea is that we start with occupation. So we're STEM jobs, right? We start with occupation on the outside ring. And so find those things that students love. Music, and that's one of the things that'll be coming up here pretty soon. But space exploration, the space science, that's geospatial science, etc. So what's a job in there, and what would be a project that they work on? And once you're able to get down to the project that they work on, it's easier to piece apart those competency sets, those particular skills that are required in order to do that particular job. And so it gives you a project. Let's work on a project that simulates effectively what an organization is able to is doing right now. Kind of the two-ended the beauty around that sort of a model is that you've got employers all around you, right? So you don't have to go. And STEM means different things in different parts of the country. It may be aerospace because that's a big industry where you're at. It may be precision agriculture. It could be any number of things. And so finding employers that are local to you and say, hey, what's a problem you deal with? That's a common approach in colleges and universities, right? They actually provide a lot of student consultancy. Some high schools have begun to adopt that sort of methodology, but in terms of not having to reshape your entire curriculum, it's a way to introduce a project fairly simply. And it's precisely what we end up doing in the STEM jobs labs activities that we bring into classrooms for them. So.
Yeah, we've worked really hard to try to put together some activities that really focus on this model and give teachers a really unique perspective in terms of engaging their students with that career focus.
Sure. Another piece that allows you to do is to integrate across disciplines in your classroom. So you had some interesting conversations at the Propel School.
Yeah, so I was at Propel Schools here in the Pittsburgh area, and we were meeting with all of their science teachers and talking about the resources that we provide, lesson plans, activities, those kind of things. And one particular one that was really intriguing was on alternative energy sources, and a project that we had where students would work on actually building you were going to put the slide
flip over there. They cannot possibly see that.
No, they can't see the writing at all. I did. I actually made it smaller than it was originally, just so it couldn't be
read at all.
Be seen, right? But it's essentially a design competition to build a sustainable home in their city, which is going to be a really important thing for students to understand going forward. I mean, with all the energy issues that we're facing and fossil fuels and those kind of things, like the idea about sustainable housing and really energy efficient housing is really important. This actually is an activity that the group really latched onto. And what was fantastic was they really started thinking about how, as a school, they could all be involved in this. So, we outlined some things to consider. Talks about climate and weather, insulation and flooring, the shape of the house, surface area, volume of the house. You can see math and science and biology comes in terms of waste disposal, plants. How do you use plants to optimize and control energy and water usage in your house? Obviously, power, sewage. They start also thinking about things like just designing the house, like the artistic design of the house, bringing in the architectural programs to have students use the CAD programs and design the physical look of the house, the makeup of the house. Things like landscaping. Like, do we put out grass or do we xeriscape it? What do we do to make sure that we're maximizing water efficiency and those kind of things? Bringing in the math team to work on a budget for that, incorporating the design team into that, and just really building this school-wide project around it. They even started talking about, we had one gentleman who was a history major originally. Now he's teaching science, but he was originally a history major. And he brought the idea about looking at how this project would have been different 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. You know, what materials did they have to work with? What were the typical design elements of that period? What were some of the different issues they had in terms of, you know, waste disposal and all kinds of things like that. So bringing in the history classes to it, bringing in all of the different social sciences.
Yep. And so we use it like a modified 5E model. This
Right.
is the explore portion of that. In fact, we're going to have a deeper discussion about that model. I think the next webinar that we're coming in.
Yeah,
correct?
I believe we'll get into those next time.
Okay.
So, but it's just it's a great,
Yeah.
they're a great way to get students, and 5E models have been very, in the past, have been very kind of teacher centric. And we're really working to try to reshape those, a little more of a project-based learning kind of feel to them. And we'll actually be talking about those at one of our hangouts later on in the year. We're going to bring in some people. One of our colleagues who has a master's degree in education from Columbia, I think, is going to join us and talk about the evolution of 5E lesson plans and project-based learning and how to integrate those into your classrooms as teachers. And you know, from the employer and college perspective, you know, what this does is it really, again, gives you students who are far more focused on going to college, far more focused on being prepared for college, and far more ready to be prepared to join the workforce. You know, more higher quality workforce candidates there,
Sure.
because they're engaging in these things at an early age.
Yeah, and it gives you the ability to, as an employer, like, how do I relate to a classroom? How do I support teachers in what they're doing? From the college perspective, you know, how do we make connections with students in dynamic ways to show them what our programs end up leading to? This type of model is it's simple. It's really about creating templates. I'm going to break into our box here, and so this is what we end up doing is devising a number of these templates to pull through there, and then in terms of the publication that we have, we'll distribute those along with the publication each year, or each quarter we go through. So you got land, air, sea, space. So these will be developing models around those next industries coming out immediately, and then additional models coming through there. All of these are master to PhD level prepared.
Right.
But again, it's really about understanding the model. I think once you get a sense of the templates and how they work, being able to integrate that rapidly, whether you're, regardless of where you are on this perspective, on the spectrum of things, to take this model and to implement that fairly quickly,
Right,
is a piece of that. So.
And they all have this focus of, you are now in this role. You are now a home designer. You are now a food stylist. You are now an engineer for, an aerospace company. And here's the project you take. And the great thing about that, again, is, it gets students to be engaged in what that life looks like, what that career looks like. And whether you are an employer in aerospace industry or not, getting those students engaged in that idea benefits your industry, because that student is going to be more engaged in their STEM courses. They're going to gain more of those really critical skills we talked about. And when they do choose that career that they want to go into, they're going to be more prepared for it, whether it's yours or somebody else's. But again, we're filling that pipeline across the board with much more higher quality candidate that's coming out of school.
Digging in there, I know we've only got a few minutes before we break into the kind of the end of this, but I do want to begin at least to touch on this second portion of how can I do what I love,
right,
answering that question. And so the research that we have behind all of this really digs into, started with the federal model. And so if you go to ONET, if you go to the Department of Labor site and you look at this phenomenal chart right here, so this would be one of the conceptual competency-based models on jobs in a particular given industry. And you can see all the way down from personal effectiveness to academic competencies, workplace competencies, all this sort of thing. And there are a lot of those as they're broken out. The question is, so how on earth, as a teacher, how on earth as a even an employer, oftentimes I've found that employers don't have an idea of what skills and knowledge they actually need in jobs, and where the demand is. And so we've actually done full mapping of these particular models and the demand structures around the country that we're looking to share, and that we embed in each of the issues that we've got. We do that through these top 10 spreads. I think that's probably the kind of the foundational piece of each issue,
Right.
is around these industries, 4 industries per issue. So land, air, sea, space, science. The next one's coming up, but we've done things like this one, which is looking at statistics and analytics, and have a whole model of our type program that's showing employers that actually hire for that, colleges that train around those areas, what that would mean and what that would look like. If we've got time, I'd love to kind of break into the model that we've developed around this, and see if I can pull this piece up here and present that.
Yeah, and while he's bringing that up, I know there are a few employers that are there. If you guys have any questions around building your STEM pipeline, please ask that. Also, if you haven't already taken the poll on what do you struggle with in regards to your STEM programs, engaging students, engaging parents, or building partnerships, please take those poll questions. Right now, it's 50% of respondents have said engaging students is their most difficult part, and 50% have said engaging parents is the most difficult part. So if you haven't taken that, please do. We'd love to know what your thoughts are on that. And I know a couple of you have asked questions, Kevin and Mary, or Kevin has a question about conferences. So we'll make sure we get to that towards the end, like 5 minutes or so. So
jump into this Q&A side of it, for sure. So yeah, engaging the parent piece, having programs that do these kinds of things can help that. But I wanted to break in just to try to bring these worlds together. So this is the fundamental core of what we've done at STEM Jobs. We're trying to give access to all of you on.
Right.
And that is the competency. So what a competency is fundamentally is the knowledge or the technical skill that you need to perform at a certain level in order to function in an occupation. So that's competency that we're talking about there.
Right.
So if you take a specific competency and you group together all these competencies at their appropriate levels, and that's what we call an occupation. So that's what I kind of diagram by that little middle piece there. Standard occupation sets, and the vast majority of materials and resources that are out there are going to be focused on occupations. The Department of Labor has a number of occupations, 800 to 900 different occupations to find. Those change sort of year to year, but very slowly in terms of how they define those. They're defined by these different competencies within that occupation, and then they're kind of grouped together overall.
And what I was to say, it's important. I mean, part of the reason for this is that an occupation title doesn't really define the job very well.
Yes.
Right. So a teacher doesn't just teach. There are a myriad of other skills, competencies that they need to be a good teacher and perform at a certain level. You need good people management skills, you need good communication skills. I mean, all kinds of things that go into the job of being a teacher. And then a more specific teaching job, becomes that position piece where you are a teacher of a certain subject, or even facilitating a certain group of students, like a special ed teacher.
Yes.
Things like that. So
it's like every employer, y'all are out there, you can raise your hands on this, right? So every employer customizes these occupations to fit the particular needs in the time and location where they are,
right,
and for their company. So when you're talking about, if you talk at just the occupational level, and then, let's say a student goes and starts working toward a particular occupation, they end up at the employer eventually not prepared, oftentimes not prepared. That's what I found, right? In recruiting, I actually took 116 different job titles and looked at 116 job titles, right? Hospital system. So we had, we're advertising for 116 different
jobs. There's not just doctors and nurses.
There's a few, that's a few different things.
More than that?
Because we're actually more than, even 116. Usually listed about 3,000 jobs at the time, and so, which is a lot, right? So all these job titles, which are almost meaningless to an applicant, or especially to a student who's aspiring, trying to figure out what can I do? Could I do any of those? Like, you probably don't even know those existed. But when we looked at it, fundamentally, it came down to 3 actual groups of competencies, like primary groups of competencies. And so we've started to work with the education system all the way down to middle school level, as well as the community college system and then the university system, to say, can you help us build a pipeline around these sets of competencies for these particular groups? And it became far more efficient to work in that particular way. So we think, right, competencies first, primarily competencies, putting those competencies together that equals an occupation. As those are customized, that equals a position. So now here's a great eye chart, right? Individuals, right, what we used to do and look at is we'll test and examine individuals, right? So we'll give them a test for a particular position or subject or otherwise, and we'll find out what they're good at doing. And then ideally together that it's a picture of their competency set. So individuals are in fact competency sets in the same sort of way, and you can relate individuals to a particular job or position that an organization will have. The real power behind this sort of methodology is to be able to say, all right, this is an individual, a student that I've got, a graduate, a professional worker, and I have these particular competencies. This is my competency profile. If I compare that to what an actual position or job requires, then I come up with maybe a 70% match, a 75% match, et cetera, 100% match, et cetera. And I'm going to have some kind of a gap between where you are and where you'd like to be. And that's where training and education.
Right.
What we find is that educators would love to know this piece.
Right.
Right. They'd love to know probably that piece. They'd also love to know, usually they know that piece because they're doing a lot of the assessment piece. But knowing those pieces, how that could reshape and change and really empower the programs that you're running is huge. And that's where we're heading, right?
Well, even knowing this piece, even knowing the profile piece, I think most educators know more information about students around standards. And we're doing a lot of mapping of standards to competencies here, which is going to be a really big leap forward on things. But the standard piece is what teachers tend to know, but they still don't know, well, how does that standard map to that skill, which then maps to that occupation and those kind of things. So it's, making those connections is going to provide a lot of powerful information for teachers to be able to use.
Yeah, and that's to your point, that's exactly what we're looking at, right? You've got competency in the job world, competency to assessment to occupation to position, right? There's this sort of change across there. In the education world, it's competency to standard. I'm going to move my box here, or toolkit. Standard to the subject, right? So a subject is a set of standards. A standard, it can be correlated to competency, to a competency, to multiple competencies. That's the piece that we are finishing right now. Extremely excited about. All the activities that we have, we actually map here to the standard level. And then, so from there, you'll be able to break those standards apart to the competency level and then make the direct correlation across to occupations, positions. So we got subjects when they're brought together across a curriculum ends up being a program, an educational program. Right. And so combining those and looking across those, what we are building out is this idea of taking position requirements. Here's what specific employers are looking for. These are the gaps of an individual, and it could be their interest, right? Here's my interest of what I want to do, and here's what I've taken and completed already. So what do I need to get into in order to complete that? And then being able to recommend to them training that they should take. And with this model, the goal of what we're developing, the platform we'll be rolling out here in 2016, will allow anyone across any of those spectrums, whether you are middle school, high school, middle school preparing to go to high school, what are the high school courses I should take based on what I would like to do,
right?
All the way to I'm in college and now I need a job. This is what I'm capable of doing. What's the next step for that? Here's that relation to being the employer to saying, well, how on earth do I connect with who, and who's the best match for the types of positions that I'm hiring for? So that's at least an initial piece of that model. We'll be getting much deeper into that as we break apart specific occupations. But every issue effectively of STEM jobs really taps into that foundational model and makes it ideally simpler from that initial perspective of what would you like to do.
Yeah, and what you showed is sort of all of the behind the scenes things that we've done and are doing to try to make
just trying to scare people. That's,
you
could do all that, or
right.
We could help you out.
And we've kind of got that covered for you. So a couple of questions that kind of came in. One, early on, Kevin was asking about if we're going to be
having any conferences in the future. Well, one of the things that, or a few things that we're doing, we're obviously working on this series of Hangouts, and this is all really introductory right now, but we're really working on bringing on some amazing speakers and people to join us. We have some great things lined up that I think people are going to really get a lot out of in terms of just their experience and things that are going on across the country with STEM.
And right now we're leveraging other conferences as well. So we are, in fact, I think we should have on the site those locations. We'll shoot those out on social media if you're connected with us there, but shooting out those locations where we're at. For sure, I believe in the future we will have full conferences, probably regionalized at first and then working up toward it. There's a lot of partners out there that have a ton of conferences, so it really is about being in the locations where you will be at, and then doing this in a virtual manner, so you've got the greatest access to be able to implement things today, and that's really what we're rolling to.
Yeah. And then we got a question through email. Is what's the most common mistake employers make in workforce development?
So let me, I would love to just dive all over that piece. So the most common mistake is that they use a template when they're hiring. And honestly, they don't understand the basic competency of what they're hiring for. And it's, I'm sure, frustration level, as we've talked to, of educators in colleges and the rest of that is the blame that falls on educators starts with employers not truly knowing what it is that a person needs to know and to do well, and at what level to perform well in your jobs. You may know one, you may know two, but knowing that across the board, and then what it looks like to move that person up inside your organization, how those link together.
Right.
So using the vast majority of this is why I hate resumes, right? So you can kill the resume. Because you've got job listings, and we're talking about positions, so that's sort of what do you hire for overall. But the job listing is put out. The vast majority of those are based upon templates, because you've got to list it, you got to list a whole bunch of things. Those templates rarely connect well with what you actually need, and so usually the education requirement is way overinflated. For sure, like in healthcare, we were hiring because of the location we were at in the DC area. There were so many people with bachelor's degrees. It was just flooded with bachelor's degrees. We literally didn't have to hire anybody that didn't have a bachelor's degree in any program because I just had so many resumes around there. But that didn't serve us well. In fact, First Energy is a company we've worked with recently, and they've actually required people to go back and get an associate's degree for a number of positions because of the technical level skills that are required in certain positions. And I find that a very interesting piece. In working with EKU, because of the conversations they were having with local employers there, they took the chemistry and the biochem program that they had and broke that into 3 parts. And that's a really long explanation of the question that you had on there. But they broke it into the traditional concept of a STEM degree program is where does that individual who's graduated in a traditional chemistry program go in terms of a job? I know in healthcare, there's no place for you to hire you. Right. Just literally, there really isn't. I mean, you're going to have to go on for a master's degree, PhD. It's a research-based program, but foundational great content that you're learning and skills as well. But how does it relate to a job? And so the next thing you see most universities doing is they're adding a pre-professional program to that. So now you can take a pre-professional track, typically pre-med, something to that effect. What they do is the next step onto that, and then the forensics program is a good example of that. And it's interesting because the traditional academic model looks down on applied sciences as being something less than. In fact, it is and should be something more than. It should be the step up from that chemistry program, fundamental program overall. And that's what we saw as they started to apply more of these applied sciences as a step up from the traditional sort of research-based programs. They begin to see lift and degree completions and hiring rates increase. And we're kind of seeing that sort of a model. Those are really long explanations to that question. I hope that answered it. But I've got a lot more that we could soapbox on that piece of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you look at it from the educator's perspective. Again, that's my background is, I think it's the opposite, not the opposite problem, but they same problem, opposite angle. They don't understand the
the job requirements at all either. So they have no ability to connect what's happening in their classroom in a real sense, and they tend to wing it. Well, you're going to use this, this particular math skill in, being a financial analyst. Well, you're not really going to do that. You're going to use some spreadsheets, and you're going to have a combination of skills. That's the whole thing about competency based that I really kind of appreciate, is that it's not a singular skill. It's more of a set of skills, a set of knowledge, a set of aptitudes or attitudes about that job that kind of go together, that build competencies.
Yeah, for sure.
And
it's it's amazing to me, and a piece that we just try to push, and I hope that you can help us continue to kind of push this out there in your communities, is for so long we've been denigrating the high school diploma,
Right.
and now it's the bachelor's degree almost useless because there's so many, and not the employers that don't. The second thing, worst thing they probably do, is they don't look beyond a degree. Like they use that as the screening mechanism and don't look at what's actually been taught and at what level it has actually been taught. But when you break down to these competency levels and really investigate and do comparative analysis of these things, and some of that takes some time, but some of that doesn't take all that much time.
Right.
You find out that what you're learning at the high school level oftentimes exceeds other types of training programs that are out there, prepares you very well. Oftentimes, maybe more of a maturity piece on for the student in bringing them into an organization. Or that there are, in fact, educational pieces that they need to learn that are more applied, or that, in fact, are at higher levels based upon the job that they're going into. But this sense that every job must always continually require higher levels of degrees does not make a whole lot of sense. We need to get smarter about what it is, the value that we place on what students are learning. And how we're developing these things. And I know the frustration on the employer side of that was just constantly seeing all of these individuals coming in not prepared because we hadn't engaged the education institution to tell them, this is what we need. Today, 5 years from now, we have a pretty good plan of what we're looking at. Now, we may not know the specific jobs that we've got. We have a better sense of that than you do as educators. Here's our plan. Let's work together on this.
Right.
More of that needs to happen.
And I think one of the things that I've seen in working with a lot of the state standards, Common Core standards, the new TEKS in Texas and other states that are working on standards, is you see these practice standards, you see these habits of mind that are integrated into these standards that really go back to those four things that we talked about. You want students that are able to be critical thinkers, that are have good data analysis skills, that are able to solve and persevere in complex problem solving, and that are able to think creatively and be innovative with what they do. I think the employers look at that as being those are the valuable traits to have, and the other skills around those. If you have those qualities, you pick up the other things relatively easy. And it's not always the case. Obviously, you're not going to pick up things like neurosurgery just because you're a good complex problem solver.
Yeah.
There's a little more work involved in that. But for a lot of jobs, when I've been hiring in the past, people that were highly energized, creative, good problem solvers, people that were able to do those things, and maybe lacked a few of the other skills that were necessary. I was with that and said, well, this is easy to train for. This is hard to find. So yeah, let's bring them on, get them on board, give them those other skills. And again, because they have those baseline qualities, training them in the other things is cake usually.
Yeah, and then to your point, engineering is a great example of exactly what you're talking about. You track the trajectory of engineers from industry to industry. There's a tremendous amount of fluidity. Certainly, you got specialties. People specialize over time, but the fundamental skills, and again, whether you go in and you complete a degree in chemical engineering or mechanical or civil or electrical engineering, there's some fundamental specialty pieces that you're getting out of that. But those core track them. You just track engineers, and we've seen this over time. They will shift between all of those different disciplines across different industries. It's an interesting piece of fundamental core skills that we're talking about.
Yep. Definitely.
So it's good. I know we're I think about time here, and our next web series on this, we're going to try to that we didn't get anywhere near the depth of what I wanted to on
Right.
the last half of that. But I know we've got 2 other of those questions we want to dig into in greater detail. This next Tuesday. So this is Wednesday.
Yeah.
Last week was Thursday, right? So Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Yep.
Same STEM Jobs time. Same
STEM Jobs channel.
Right. Until then, thank you for your questions, for your participation. Share with others that are out there, and
Yeah.
love, right?
And if you haven't done the STEM Jobs approved survey, I recommend you guys doing that. EP's got something he wants us to do as well. Oh yeah, you're going to get a link to a
Just whisper
replay
to us
by,
that way.
yeah, I know. We see EP to come over here on the camera side one of these days. You're going to get a replay link by email. Please share that out with others if you want them to get this information. And we look forward to talking to you all next Tuesday.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, shoot them over. We're glad to answer those and to engage in with that. If you've got best practices to share, we'd love to bring you on. The technology that we end up using here, we can actually cycle you in.
Yeah.
So you might need a.
Yeah, if you've got something you want to share, we're looking to share that and share best practices across the country. If you have cool things going on at your school or your place of employment or the college that you work at, we would love to partner with you and just make that stuff even more amazing and awesome. So let us know.
Thanks.
All
And as
right.
always, do what you love.
Absolutely.